guys, Maddie from Drippy here. Today I'm going to show you how to make a resin art picnic table. So I'm going to show you from start to finish, so even the boring bits like taping up the underside of the board and how to prepare for your resin, and then how to pour it and how to finish it as well. So first things first, you need your picnic table. So we actually get these made by a small business based on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland called Woozy Picnic Tables. We love working with them, and they pop my logo on the bottom as well, so that's extra fun. You can find picnic tables at Kmart and stuff now as well, but the reason we love these is because Ben from Woozy makes these for us unvarnished. So it's just a raw pine wood, and the beauty of having an unvarnished surface to resin means that your resin sort of soaks into the wood and it sticks really well, so you get wonderfully coated edges. They look just as beautiful as the top of the board does. Whereas if your board has a bit of a varnish or an oil or a finish on it, the resin might not stick so well to the edges. So that's my top tip for making sure that your piece looks really professional. So yeah, the first thing that we're going to do is just protect the underside of the board, so that when the resin drips through all the holes and around the edges, you don't end up with all of these little resin drips along the bottom underside of the board. So for that, we're just going to need painter's tape. You could use any tape, but I find that a packing tape can sometimes leave a really sticky residue on the wood once you peel it off, because it is unvarnished. It sort of sticks really well to the wood. So painter's tape is great because it doesn't leave a sticky residue. And then I like to use a Stanley knife just to get in around all of the tricky little details on this shaped board. So now the underside of the board is all taped up, so you can see the underneath edges are going to be protected from any resin drips. And then also I've gone and popped some plastic bags over the feet of the picnic table, because I will be standing it up on its feet to do the resin. And I just don't want any pools of resin to kind of get stuck to the feet of the piece. So it's all protected and ready to go. So now that I've got all of my pigments in their cups and I've got my resin all mixed up and ready to go, so I'm going to divide my resin up into the pigment cups, and then depending on which color I want more of on the piece, I'll put more resin in. So for example, I think I'm going to do quite a bit of the turquoise color that I've got going on, so I'm going to make sure I put more resin in my turquoise cup than say my light aqua cup, because I know I don't want to use too much of that. This board is also going to take like 2 to 3 coats of resin. So I'm going to do the first color layer now. Then I'm going to have a look and see how it turns out to see whether I want to do a second layer of color on top of the first color layer, or if it's looking fine, then I'm just going to do my clear flood coat over the whole piece once that first layer is dry. So I always like to see how it turns out and then just sort of roll with it. I don't ever really have too much of a solid plan going on for what I'm going to do. I just kind of do it and see what happens. so now that my first ocean colored resin layer is dry on my picnic table, I'm pretty happy with the way it's turned out, so I don't really want to do a second layer of color on it. So now it's time to just do the clear flood coat over the whole piece. So this is going to lock in the blue ocean colors, but it's also going to level out the entire piece so that it's not uneven where the first layer of resin meets the wood. And the second layer of resin is going to act like a varnish coat on the wood. So it's going to protect it from any stains or spills and just make sure that wood has really great longevity. So the first thing I'm going to do now is I'm just going to wipe down the piece just with a lint-free cloth, just because it has been here for 2 days. It was raining really heavy yesterday, so I didn't want to do the final flood coat yesterday just in case it cured a bit funny. But today's nice and sunny, so I'm going to go ahead and do that flood coat of clear resin now. So I've also just decided that I'm just going to add a little bit of gold leafing details here. So you want to do this before you do your final clear flood coat of resin. So I just used a tacky foil glue. I use this Express It brand. I love it. I've had this bottle for ages, and as you can see, I'm only partway through. So you don't need very much. So I'm just gonna kind of blob it on a little bit. Nothing too precise because I want it to be a bit of like a scattered gold leaf effect. And I'm just gonna pat it in a bit with my finger. I've probably gone and put too much glue on, but oh well. So you just want to wait for that to dry a little bit so it gets nice and tacky before you put your gold leaf on. Now that that glue has started to dry and go nice and tacky, I'm going to add my gold foil leaf. So I'm just going to grab little sections of gold foil and place it on that glue. So just kind of pat it on, stick it on, lift it off, just so you get a nice scattered effect with the gold leaf. So yeah, just keep doing that until you're happy with how much gold leaf you have on your piece. So my resin's all mixed up. In this final flood coat step, I like to add a little extra splash of part B, maybe like a tablespoon or 2 of extra part B resin, because that just makes sure that it's a little bit of extra hardener in there. So it'll cure a tiny bit faster, a tiny bit harder. And it just makes sure that you've got your ratio right, because the last thing you want is for your flood coat to become or to be a little bit too soft. Right, so now we just go ahead and pour it all over. So I like to get a nice generous spread of clear resin on there and make sure it's nice and even. And start out with a little bit, and then get your fingers in there. Really rub it into the piece and just make sure that you've got every little bit coated. This is when it's good to make sure you're working in a room with good lighting so you can really see any bits that you might have missed. And for the bits where you're going over the gold leaf, you just want to be careful to not rub too hard, because you don't want to pull any of that gold leaf off and end up with little gold floaters. So now that I've got the resin coating all of the board, and I've gone and coated all of the little wine glass holder holes all through the board, just make sure they're nice and coated and they've got a good amount of resin on them. Because the board's unvarnished, it will really suck that resin up and hang on to it, so you don't have to worry too much about it all dripping off. I'm going to just grab my heat gun and just give it a quick scan over to pop all the bubbles. So I'm not sure if you can really see this in the video, but the clear flood coat's actually dried quite sort of pitted and uneven. You can kind of see it in the light. It's almost like it's got little tiny hail damage. But basically a storm came through at the wrong time last night after I'd done the flood coat, and some humidity has kind of wreaked havoc on the resin. So unfortunately, I'm not happy with this flood coat. So time to do another one. So now that I'm happy with the way that the resin has cured on this layer, everything's really nice and smooth. It didn't rain last night, so it dried perfect. I am going to peel off all the tape on the back. So you want to start peeling all that tape off, and then you can also use a Stanley knife to slice off any of those little dots stuck behind. So this usually takes a while to do. The back of my board is now free from resin drips, and so I'm going to oil the back side of the board to protect it. And here we have the finished piece. I'm pretty happy with it. I think it's turned out great. That final flood coat is so smooth. So it's off to its new home to be given as a Christmas gift.